Hi everyone, this is Darius from Self-Archeology.com. Today I am talking with a man who some of you may already know. He worked for 10 years as a therapist. He's a filmmaker, writer, and musician. He's my colleague, truth seeker, and friend, Daniel Mackler. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, Darius. Nice to talk.
Likewise, Daniel. Now, in your work, you talk a lot about self-knowledge, childhood trauma, healing, and personal growth. I myself find these topics completely fascinating and I have spent a lot of time doing self work. But why do you think it's important and useful for a person to dedicate a good amount of time to self knowledge, personal history, introspection, and things like that?
Well, I think if a person doesn't dedicate a lot of time to that, basically they're living on autopilot. They're not becoming more conscious, and then therefore they're not really growing. And if they're not really growing, I don't really see them as meeting their mandate for life. And for me personally, if I'm not growing and becoming more aware, I don't really see the purpose in living. Then it's kind of more like just flatlining instead and living for comfort. So for me, life is an exploration. And if I'm not doing self-knowledge, then I'm not exploring basically the most important thing in my world, which is my inner world. And that's my conduit to understand the outside world. So for me to understand the world, I have to understand myself first.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm curious, how did your own personal self archaeological journey started? Or to put it differently, how were you able to retain the rationality and curiosity that we do have as children, but so many of us are forced to lose or repress? Could you talk a little bit about your childhood and your interest in truth and self knowledge?
Sure. I think, well, I remember when I was a kid, I always explored. I had a lot of pride in that even, and people often told me that I was exceptionally curious. People pointed that out often, that that was one of my more noticeable qualities, that I was very curious. But I wasn't extremely curious about my inner world. That was a territory that was a little too scary for me when I was a kid, even pretty much as a teenager. It wasn't until I was a late teenager that I started becoming more actively curious about my inner world. But as a child, I was very interested in studying nature and fishing and hunting and doing taxidermy and collecting rocks and minerals and having a butterfly collection, of doing sports and athletics, exploring what I could do with my body in the world, basically exploring dating, exploring drinking alcohol, trying to do really well in school, learning math. I read a huge amount, and so I was very much an expanding person as a teenager, but it was not so much inwardly directed. That transition pretty much came. I see that the defining point for me was when I was about 20 years old, and I started really looking within much more consciously. I was writing in my journal starting when I was 17, but it was very scary and I wasn't very good at it. It was very, actually very difficult. I was weak in that area. But when I was 20, it started much more strongly. And I think what happened is I started becoming a more independent adult. I started breaking away from my parents much more. I started doing things on my own, far away from home. And somehow being out in the world, away from my family, I just suddenly had the space to really have a very strong relationship with myself. It was a new relationship because I'd never had it so powerfully before, where it was very clear that this relationship, that these thoughts going through my head and my feelings, were a relationship between me and me. I'd never had that before. And so once I realized that, and it came powerfully when I was 20, it was 21 years ago, actually. I just started doing inner work. It just happened. I didn't even know that that's what it was. I knew that I suddenly had an incredibly powerful relationship with myself, but I didn't use any of the terms we're using now because I didn't have any terms for it. I just knew that something powerful was happening inside of me, and it just kept growing and growing and growing, and it's just become more intense over the years. And also my relationship with myself has become more powerful, more dedicated, more caring, more more self-respecting. And then also by extension, I've just become a better, stronger person in the world. I think my morals have become stronger. My sense of caring for others has become stronger. My sense of strength as a person with an internal force has become stronger. Um, My understanding of human psychology has become stronger. My understanding of my own strengths and weaknesses has become stronger. My understanding of my childhood and what happened to me has become stronger. My understanding of my parents has become stronger. My parents being like who they are, what they did to me, what happened to them, why they are the way that they are. Also just understanding why I was pretty much throughout my whole life, the strengths and the weaknesses. Like I wasn't necessarily the most positive person at all when I was a teenager. I had a lot of rage and anger and sadness and hurt and jealousy. I still have some of those qualities, just definitely much, much less now at age 41. But I really think the profound thing that changed my life was becoming independent from my parents and doing a lot of inner work. And both have led to the other. So breaking away from my parents has given me a lot more strength and determination to become a better, healthier person through self-knowledge. And then doing all this inner work, to use your word, self-archeology, has also propelled me forward into more independence, not just from my parents, but internally from the parents that they put inside of me, and breaking from those lies.